Hey, this is Shinya from Jesus Center, and we want to learn and we want to encourage by a word of God today. And we're going to learn from 1 Timothy chapter 6. We as a Jesus Center, we've been learning this book for about 6 months, and we came to the final chapter. And the reason why this book was written, well, this is basically a letter from Paul to Timothy, is because Paul wanted to encourage Timothy. And Timothy was in Ephesus because Paul traveled around Europe, and there are some problems in Ephesus, and Paul wanted to stay there and resolved some problems, but he couldn't stay there. So Timothy was a faithful servant and disciple of Paul. So Paul told Timothy to stay there to resolve all problems. And Timothy was a young pastor over there, and he was trying to deal all the problems. And the big problem was the false teachings. So there are some false teachers and false prophets. And then one day, these false leaders try to hit Timothy, and Timothy was so offended and so discouraged, and he thought that he almost wanted to quit his job as a pastor there. And Paul heard about what was going on in Ephesus and what happened to Timothy. So Paul wrote basically two things. One is some of the solutions that Timothy can do in Ephesus for the false teaching, the false teachers in their churches. And second, Paul wrote a lot of encouragement to Timothy. So today's chapter, Paul was talking about a lot of encouragement to Timothy. Paul knew that what happened to Timothy, and that was a hard situation, but Paul was mentioning that you gotta fight the good fight of the faith, but just not the good fight, just a fight of the faith, for God, Your fight is not for you. Your fight is with God and for God. So you gotta fight the good fight, So there are two things that Paul is mentioning to fight the good fight of the faith. And one is Paul is trying to tell Timothy who Timothy is. Who Timothy is. There's one famous magician. It's called Steve Coleman in America. He is one of the best magician in America. And one day he was on a TV and he was asked, how did you become a good, great, awesome magician? And he's like, he was asked like, so did you follow any great magician? And he said no. And then TV reporter said, how did you become a great magician? And he mentioned three things that he was trying to tell himself. The one is he is the top magician, and he introduced himself as a great magician wherever he goes. So one day he went to town to do his magic on the street, but he introduced himself as a top magician in this state, So he introduced himself. He thought that he is a top. That's a number one. Second, he showed himself as a top magician. How? First, he went into the very, very expensive clothes store, and he bought Italian suit. Back in the day, all the magicians around him was wearing the cheap clothes, so he wanted to be a best magician. So he tried to wear good suits, and he bought a Rolex, and he put that on his wrist. He tried to show himself that he is the number one to others. And third, he said to no to the small shows. He only did a big show. So some people called him up, and he's like, so we want to have your magic in our small town meetings. And he said, well, sorry, I can't go. Could you come to this department in small room and do the magic? He said, no, I can't do it. We have magic show in large hotel room in the largest hotel in this state. Could you do that and come and do your magic? And he said, yes. Only he chose the big shows. He ignored the small shows. His managers and his family said, so why don't you do the small shows? Because we need money. But he said, well, I know that we need money, but we don't need small shows. We need big shows because I am going to be a big magician. And what happened is he became whatever he called himself. So it's very interesting that we become whatever we think we are. So if you think that you're bad, you become bad. But if you think you're good, you become good, you know. So in this situation, Timothy was thinking about, I can't do it. I'm not a good preacher. I'm not a good teacher. He was so discouraged. So Paul was trying to tell who Timothy is originally. Paul didn't say, oh, you're a great guy. You're a great preacher. You know, you're a great pastor. He didn't say that. Paul said, you are men of God. You're men of God. We hear that, oh, you're a man of God. You're a great person, you know. But man of God doesn't mean you're a great guy, you know. Man of God means a lot, you know. Firstly, a man of God means you're owned by God. You know, God is always with you. God is always in you, you know. And also, there are other meanings. And you're owned by God, so you have beautiful future. You have great future. And Jeremiah 29:11 said, "You're great future because you're a man of God. You're owned by God." And also, and if you're owned by God, you're a man of God, so God will protect you. God will provide anything you want, you need. Psalm 23 verse said. And also Isaiah 43:21 said, "The people I formed for myself," you know, if you are a man of God, that they may proclaim my praise. So we as a man of God, we proclaim that who God is, how beautiful God is. And also Philippians 3 verse 20 said, our citizenship is in heaven. So wherever you are, whatever you happened, to ultimately we go back to our house. We go back to our country, we as a man of God. So Paul tried to tell Timothy that in this difficult situation, you're men of God. You're owned by God, and God will always help you in any situations. If it's difficult, if it's so ultimately difficult, God is always with you. So this message is not only for Timothy, but also us too. So when we believe Jesus is our Savior, we are going to be owned by God. That means God will always help you. God is a provider. and God will listen our prayer in any situations, and God will give us any the solutions that we need. So that's the one point that we learn from this chapter. So the other thing that Paul was trying to tell Timothy is who God is. He was talking about who Timothy is, but Paul is also talking about who God is. There are 4 points that Paul was mentioning. The first point is God is the blessed. God is the blessed. So wealthy, he's blessed. Well, in New Year in Japan, we have Otoshidama, which is money gift. So kids can get money gift from adults. And so we visit relatives, and we as adult give the money, and we put in a certain envelope that it says Otoshidama, and we pass out to kids. And some of the research said nowadays kids get averagely about $250 for every year. That's a lot of money. But think about 20 years ago or 30 years ago when I was little, the average of the amount that they get money gift is more. It's actually double. About $500 for each kid. It's kind of interesting. I mean, it's a lot of money. Because maybe the economy was so high, was increasing, that's why adults had a lot. So, but after that, economy went down. So maybe the average amount went down, and also maybe culture is different. I mean, culture changed, but this amount is decreased. But we as adults, when we give money gift, we have to think about how much we give. This person is in elementary school, so maybe $20 fine. But this guy is in junior high school, so maybe he should get $50. But first, we have to think how much we have. If we don't have money, we can't give. So we as a human being, we as a people, we have to get first, and secondly, we can give, But firstly, we have to get before we give. But think about God. When he gives, he didn't have to get first because he is blessed. He has a lot. He's wealthy. He's wealthiest. Not the person, but the guy in the whole world. He doesn't have to get anything before he gives. So the Paul was trying to tell Timothy that he is the blessed. So why don't you pray to your God, because he can provide anything you need. He is blessed. That's the first point. The second point is he is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. King of Kings and Lord of Lords. This phrase is so famous, so I think you know about that. But but Paul was why Paul mentioned this is because in that era, Roman Empire was all over the Europe, and the emperor was the top. So they have to obey whatever emperor said, or whatever Roman Empire said. But Paul was trying to say that if the Roman Empire said something, and Roman emperor said something to you, but you gotta remember that God is always over in that authority. He has ultimate authority. We have to remember that. He is a King of Kings, Lord of Lords. And third thing is he is immortal. He is immortal. Of course, he's immortal. So, but we as a human being, we have to face of the death, at the end of the day, and he's immortal. So it's not just saying that God and we are different. For God, time doesn't matter. So that means God is unlimited always. He is not chained by anything. So he can freely work whatever he wanted to do. So that's why we see in the Bible, there are so many prophecy that he as God tells to certain people. And for example, in Genesis chapter 15, for Abraham, God said, well, for your descendants, they are going to be a slave for 400 years. But at the same time, God told Abraham that they will be released and they are going to go back to Canaan. So that's a prophecy. And actually, 4 generations later, this prophecy was fulfilled. Why God knows about these future and past? Because for God, time doesn't matter. He can see wherever he wants to see, which era, because time doesn't matter. So Paul was trying to tell Timothy that your God is immortal and time doesn't matter, and he is unlimited God. That's a point that he was talking about. That's number 3. And number 4 is in verse 16 says, who alone is immortal and who lives in unapproachable light, whom no one has seen or can see. So no one has seen or can't see because he lives in an unapproachable light place. So the reason why Paul mentioned about this is because there are so many great teachers around, but they are false teachers. But people start to think that, they're God, their teaching is so great. They start to think that they're God, Or the false teachers taught church people to worship idols. That's wrong. The wrong teachings. So Paul was trying to tell that if there are any great teachers, they're not God. If you're worshiping idols, they are not God, because God has never been seen. He is in heaven, and nobody could see that. So these are the points that Paul was talking about today. When we fight the good fight of the faith, we have to think about who we are and who God is. We're men of God. God is always our help. God provides anything we need. He's unconditionally love us. And God has authority over anything, and he has never seen, and he is a Lord of Lords, a King of Kings, and Lord of Lords, and he is unlimited God. And that's the thing that Paul was teaching today to us, and we want to remember all these points. So have you guys seen the Skytree? There is a Skytree in Tokyo, and I'm kind of like a country guy, so we don't go to Tokyo a lot. But when we go to Disneyland or some other places by driving, we see Skytree from far side in the freeway. When we see Skytree from the far side, it's not large. It's not a big, that's a Skytree we can see. But when we go down right by the Skytree, it's so big. Like how people make that, It's so tall. How do you have like a construction in the mid of Tokyo and to build this large tower, It's so amazing. But one of the French act scripts writer says that when you see the mountain, you never realize how big it is from far side. But when you get closer and closer, you realize how big it is. And this guy said, it's same with God. If you are far away from God, you feel like God is small. But when you get closer and closer, you feel God is big in you. So, I want to ask all of you that how big God is now in you. How large? Is it small? Is it big? How big, So wherever you are now, whatever you feel like in you, let us get closer to 1 or 2 or 3 more steps towards the God in this week. All right. Thank you for listening to the Sentence Sermon, and God bless you, and bye.